What was your life like prior to being in England?
Well, I had a very happy childhood, and every other year we used to go to Ostend, a place in France, because my father was from Belgium, and then he'd go to Belgium to visit his mother. So, yeah, we had a happy childhood.
What stands out the most about your life in England?
Pardon?
What stands out the most about your life in England?
Well, it was very peaceful. We lived in a little, about the size of Midland. The town I came from was called Enfield. And as I said, we just led a quiet life, went to school. I mostly stayed in the library. I like the library. And that's it. I played with my sisters and didn't know what war was all about.
What does the term guest children mean?
Well, they use that term instead of saying evacuees or refugees or something, because we were here guests of Canada, but they sent children to New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and the States, you know, thousands of kids. So, because they knew they were going to bomb England, bomb London, and we were going to be the next generation, so they wanted to save the children, eh? So they called us guests, war guests.
How was your trip to Canada financed?
Well, my parents, I believe, had to contribute some, and the rest was between the English and the Canadian government. I'm not sure how that worked, but I know my parents had to send so much. Because next question you're coming up with, I came over with my 3 sisters. There was 4 of us. So I was the eldest, I was 13, and the youngest was 9.
So what possessions did you get to bring with you?
Clothes. I think my mother was given a list of what clothes to bring, and we could only carry a certain size suitcase, you know. And we had to have our little gas masks on and our labels.
What type of work experiences did you have?
Well, mostly after I went back. I went back during the war in 1944, and the second largest convoy ever to cross the Atlantic was 102 ships, and I was on a banana boat, Fife Line, and it took us 16 days to cross the Atlantic because found out afterwards we were being chased by subs, you know, but it was merchant navy and they were carrying supplies for the war, you know. So that's how I got back. So when I got back, I don't know if you know about the rockets and things they used to send over from France. When Germany invaded France, they set up, I don't know what you would call it, but then they would shoot these rockets over. They looked like great big huge cigars, but they would come over and you'd hear the engine, and when the engine stopped, it would either drop or just coast, and then it would land on houses and just blow the whole thing up. And we called them doodlebugs. And they had just dropped one when I got home, and they had the V2s as well. They were bad. They destroyed streets, you know. So I used to have to go up to London on the train, and one day I was a bit early for a change. I caught the earlier train, and they dropped one on the train I would have been on. So, but I was pretty scared when I went home because Canada, there was nothing like that to do with war, you know. So, and everything was blacked out, everything blacked out, so that they couldn't, when the bombers came over, they couldn't see light to drop the bombs, you know. So we had to work by candlelight sometimes because the power would go off, you know.
So why did you go back to England just to visit family?
What was that?
When you went back in 1944, did you just come back to visit family?
No, because the government, how can I say it, they controlled what you did. And when you got to 18, the government told you what you should do, either go to the forces or, like my dad was a hairdresser and he knew wives of people that were in the government and stuff. So I wrote my civil service exam, and I worked for the Ministry of War Transport in Berkeley Square, which is not far from Piccadilly. And so, you know, sometimes if they'd bomb during the night, it was all blacked out. But it was interesting because I was in the department to do with the Navy, and the ship that we came out on, the Huronia, was eventually torpedoed, so I got to know about that, you know. But anyway, I wanted to come back to Canada because I'd met this boy in high school, you know. And we wrote to one another all the time, and then he sent me an engagement ring inside a chocolate. And so I came back supposedly to marry him, but we'd been apart 2 years, and you know, when you're in high school, you know, you think you're madly in love. But anyway, we just he joined the Navy, and then we kind of looked at one another and we said, this isn't going to work. So I've been on my own since I was 19.
So did your family have a bomb shelter when you were in England?
Yeah, my mom did. We had a pond in our garden, and I don't know what they did with the goldfish, but they drained the pond, and then they were called Anderson shelters, and they were curved things, you know. And I think my mom and my brother spent every night, you know, in the bomb shelter, because there'd be bunk beds in there, and because we had a big ACAT gun or something at the top of a hill in our town, and all the shrapnel would fall into our garden, you know. My brother used to collect it.
Did you arrive through Pier 21?
Yes, we did. And I have a book there that tells us all about arriving in Pier 21. And first thing I remember, they took us to an ice cream place, and we had banana splits. Oh, lovely. Then they took us to the train, you know, a huge train, because the trains in England are small and dirty, and ones here in Canada are big and clean. So it was kind of, you know, kind of exciting, but all the same, you know, didn't know quite what was going to happen to you. So.
What were your experiences from stepping off the boat to when you arrived in Toronto?
Well, that's what I'm saying. We got on this big train and went to Toronto, and we were billeted at Hart House, which is the university down in Toronto, and they have, we were all given a medical and that kind of thing. Well, my little sister, she was 9, she got a lot of styes and I think from the change in water or something, so they kept her in the infirmary. So she said she wouldn't stay unless I stayed, so I stayed with her. And then our foster parents came and picked us up, and we went back to live with strangers, because I didn't know them. We didn't know them, you know. So,
how did Canada and England differ?
Well, as I say, England was severely bombed night after night after night in 1940, you know. And I worked with a girl in the ministry, and she'd been bombed out 3 times, you know. They lost everything each time. And Canada didn't really know what war was about. I mean, you sent forces, you know, over, but and you had a little bit of rationing, but they were severely rationed in England. You know, even 12 years after the war, they were still rationed. So it was quite different.
So, how many family members came with you to Canada?
My three sisters.
Okay. And what was your foster family like?
Well, we called them Auntie and Uncle. Auntie was a little bit strict, and I wasn't allowed to go to parties or anything at the school because she kept saying, well, you might get into trouble. I didn't know what she meant, I'll get into trouble, because I didn't know about sex in those days, you know. And I thought, how can I get into trouble? But anyway, so I wasn't allowed to go out or go here or go there. I think they were afraid that I might get hurt or something, you know. But Uncle, I called him Uncle, he was just a sweetheart. He'd lost his arm in the First World War, machine gunned, so he had it chopped off here. And he was quite a gardener, so I really liked him. But anyway.
Did you and your sisters stay together?
No, just my young sister and I, and my other sisters were twins, and they stayed first of all at one family, and then the woman got sick, so they were split up. And one of my sisters, I think she got moved 7 times because they treated some of the war guests as like little servants, and they thought she should be there to look after the children and do this, so she got a bit rebellious, you know. And the other sister, I mean, we went to Sunday school and church in England, but she got put with a family that you couldn't do anything on a Sunday but read the Bible or go to church, and it affected them, you know. She never stepped foot in the church afterwards. I've got to have a drink of tea. And we didn't see each other all during the war, so we're really split up now. You know, it split up our family.
What were the immigration laws like in Canada during the war years?
Well, I don't know, because I wasn't really old enough to, I don't know whether they were letting people immigrate. We were called landed immigrants because, well, I was here just 4 years. My sisters were here 6. So when I came back, I had to go all through that again to be a Canadian citizen, which I'm very proud to be, you know.
And can you describe your schooling and social life experiences as a teenager in Canada?
In Canada? Well, I wrote my entrance exams when I was 11. So when I came over, I was going into, I called it second form. What do you call it? Like 10th grade? 10th grade is the second year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was only 13, and most of the other kids were like 15, 16. And of course I spoke with an English accent. I said can't, you know, and so they made fun of me. And I wore my school uniform. Everybody in England wears a school uniform. And so they thought I'd come from a private school or something. It was, you know, snobby and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't pass that because I think I was very, very homesick. And what I'd had in my first year of school was different to what you get in your first year. So, you know, it took me a while. Anyway, I just repeated my second year, and I was still younger than everybody else in the class, but I got to know the kids, you know, and that was fine. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned it before, but did you experience any rationing at all?
Well, as I say, it was very, very severe in England. We were allowed 1 egg a month, and the rest of the time we got powdered eggs, which are not the greatest. And sometimes, even if you had the coupons, there wasn't enough supply, you know. My brother, he got rickets because couldn't get any fresh fruit, couldn't get oranges and things like that, you know. But everybody survived, really, you know, just on the rations. I hear you, I've got a ration book with me from Canada, but you weren't rationed very much here. I know when I went home, I couldn't believe that my mother would just put one sausage on my plate, you know, 'cause, you know. But we're only allowed so much meat and so much of this, you know, so.
Did you ever return to England after the war and to be with your family and anything like that?
Well, as I say, I had to go back and with my mum and dad, but that was strange too, because I hadn't seen them for 4 years. And you know, when you're going through your teen years, like from 13 to 17, it's a difficult time in your life anyway. And my brother, of course, was spoilt rotten because he was the only child at home and living in the, you know, shelter. So it took a while sort of to get to know my parents again. But then I decided I wanted to come back to Canada. So, but anyway.
Do you have any contact with your immediate family today?
Well, we're scattered all over. A lot of us, you know, as I say, the family's really broken up. And I don't see much. I have a sister that lives in California, and she's coming up in June, and I haven't seen her for 4 years. But the rest, we sort of don't keep in touch anymore. You know, we're really, because I was here for 10 years on my own. It took me 8 years to save up to get enough money to fly back to England. And then my sisters all decided they want to come to Canada. So they all came and lived with me, because I was married then, you know. But, and then, I don't know, we've just drifted apart.